What's up, people? How's it going? Welcome to our Week 4 preview. I'm your host, Frank Langella. Mars checking in. We're joined by my co-host, Marsilio Langella. How's everyone doing out there? What's up, chat? Another week of football is upon us. And already, Mars, I know as Mars is checking in with his audio, we're already hitting that beyond halfway mark of the regular season, which is pretty crazy. That's just how football goes, right?
Yeah, man. It's we're already halfway. It kind of flew by. I mean, you really think about it. Like I never imagined how quickly this stuff goes, but we've been coaching and playing for all these years, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to welcome our audience. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll be kind of diving in just like we normally do. And if you're new here, welcome. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button if you haven't yet already. How could you not already be part of the Fam Sports community? But if you're new here, guys, we're going to kind of go through some questions submitted with the group. And actually, this week, we're not going to have our own question segment. We'll answer any questions that are delivered because we do want to kind of look at the different leagues and kind of start looking at that. We'll look at the standings from game day 1, which is just compile their records, but we'll kind of talk about some big takeaways from each of us from each league. And then we're joined with a special guest, and that is Jackson Kearns of Dobbs Ferry. Obviously, a huge matchup coming up with them. And then we'll dive into our main event, which is our game picks. But before we do all that, we do have to have a special word from our sponsors this year, and that is Salem Ridge Construction. Are you or someone you know looking to remodel your home? Well, we have the perfect group to satisfy your needs. Salem Ridge Construction offers a wide array of remodeling services, from kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling, patio and deck building, as well as new construction for residential and commercial properties. They service folks across Westchester County, Fairfield County, New York City, and Bergen County. You want your home to reflect you, and Salem Ridge Construction are the perfect partners to achieve that. For more information on their offerings and prices, visit their website, which we will put in the description of this video, and want to thank our sponsors as always. All right, Mars, I know people probably filtering in. Obviously, this is going to be posted to our channel, so anything you miss, guys, don't worry. But usually at this part, we open up for questions. Those that are submitted from our Patreon members, which is a good way to plug in to definitely join our Patreon. We have some premium perks for our paid members coming up. I'm working on our rankings, league rankings for each one, as well as for all the leagues, as well as opening up for some top skill position players and top skill position units and offensive line units. So that's something I'm working on as well for our premium members, as well as those that get my reviews for each week. And for those that are free, you guys get our announcements, and you also can submit questions. Right, you can do it via email or directly in Patreon, and those get first dib and answered on the show. But you can also send in questions via chat. So definitely would open up that. But let's start talking about while people filter in. If people want to submit questions, because I don't have a true question segment this week, we should probably look at the standings and let's take a look. Let me blow this up a little bit. Can you guys see?
I can see the image you put up
clearly. All right. So this is coming from a screenshot from game day 1. And right now we're going to look at double A while people are kind of filtering in. We'll look at double A. B is weird, right? I mean, I could show you kind of the win-loss records at B, but they have their own kind of mathematical formula that they have to do because of all the, they take into a lot of different variables when they're ranking B, similar with C. So they're a little more complicated than the other leagues, but we'll take a look at the standings anyway. But this is looking at double A. And when you look at, just from a league record standpoint, you have Yonkers Force.
Yeah, it's okay. I think it connected back again.
Are we back? Are we back, chat? I think we're back. All right.
Yeah, I think I see it now.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. Obviously, when you go live, these unfortunate incidents happen. But looking at, again, double A, then we go to Yonkers Brave, 2-1, North Rockland, 2-1, Scarsdale, 2-1. Now, Ketchum's only played 2. They're sitting at 1-1. And these are, again, 2 different leagues. One league is kind of the power league that has 8 teams. 7 of them get in. And then the other league, only 1 get in. So, and that's Yonkers Force, Yonkers Brave, White Plains, Ketchum, all vying for 1 spot. So you really, when you look at that league, and I'll start with kind of the power league, Mars. Obviously, stepping out of the gate, Amerenik and John Jay have probably been the 2 most impressive teams to me. I mean, I don't know your thoughts. Them coming out there. North Rockland is the defending champs. Still a ton of play in Scarsdale. All these 4 teams to me on that power league have really come out of the gate really hot. I know North Rockland started off the year a little bit rough, but they were playing, that second loss is out of league. Right? That was a week 0 loss. So in league play, they're still 2-1, and we have some teams competing against each other. These last few weeks are really going to be interesting as we vie for kind of who the 7 out of 8 is. Obviously, only one of them is not going to make it, but who's going to get those top 4 seats to get those home playoff games is going to be obviously key in this one too. Any thoughts, Mars, before I talk about the other Double A league?
I mean, obviously, you had some really good showing here by John Jay and Mamaroneck. Are really the 2 teams I'm really looking at as the top contenders in Double A. But I am really impressed with Yonkers Force, obviously, how they've started the season. Probably one of the best starts that we've seen, right, in a long time. So that's obviously interesting outlook. We're going to see what happens next this week.
Yeah, and obviously Yonkers Force, Yonkers Brave, Ketchum, White Plains. Only one of them can make it. Right, so definitely interesting there. Looking at A, and again, I do hope that we can kind of have these broken up when we do kind of these standings. I wonder if when the playoff button is going to be even better. But this is, again, just looking at the entire picture, and let me blow this up a little bit more. Again, this first column is showing win-loss versus the section. But really, really interesting matchups coming when we have Harrison, who didn't lose. They lost out of on a week 0 game. Right? They've won 3 straight games on their end. We know about Rye being 4-0. Um, Clarkstown North just had their first loss, but they even battled their way back versus Rye to make it a one-score game. And then Eastchester, right? So you're looking at, and again, in A, if one side wins 75% of the games, they're not on track right now. This week is kind of the deciding factor. This is the kind of crossover week, the second round of crossovers, where we're really going to determine, are we going to have a 4-4 split between the two leagues or have a 5-3? Obviously, a lot has to, I think one side has to do a complete sweep for that to be an opportunity. So definitely um, the odds are not in their favor for that to happen. So it kind of feels like it's going to be a 4-4, and obviously everyone vying for that 4-4. And obviously on the other side, when you have Brewster has one league loss, Somers doesn't have a league loss, right? Because they lost the crossover versus Rise, so that one right there is not so much in their league. That's a Section 1 loss, so they don't have a league loss yet for Somers. Mahopac has one league loss. Brewster has one league loss, but Mahopac has the tiebreaker there. Carmel has one league loss. They lost to Brewster. Lakeland has two. Yorktown has one. Um, yeah, I mean, interesting, Mars. Any thoughts on A?
I mean, I think is more competitive right now than in Double A, in my opinion. You have a lot of these close. The games got really close, or you did see a lot of teams that came back. Whether it was the Clarkstown North that clawed their way back against Rye. I mean, Somers had a big win this week, and it was close for the first half, like I called. The question of Rye, I think, is the number one team right now in A. But Harrison's right there. I mean, Harrison has that 3-0 as well. And I mean, it always feels like Harrison and Rye are going to have a showdown at the end of the year, like they always do. And that kind of is the how the year is going to end. So I'm wondering how this will play out, especially in the next few weeks, is really going to shape everything up.
Yeah, I'm looking at B again, and again, these aren't the official standings because they have their own math that has to go behind it. But um, just again, want to just show some of the games. I mean, some of the teams here and their overall records. I mean, Irvington's sitting up at the top there. That's definitely. And again, that's not just making again. This is not the official standings. This is just organized by win loss. But Irvington, what a start! I give them a lot of credit. What a start for them. Starting off 3-1. Pearl River, we obviously know. Pelham, Sleepy Hollow was kind of the surprise team so far, and they had a nice bounce back last week. Pleasantville, Westlake. So really interesting ones. The one here is there's Ardsley sitting at 1-2, which we'll talk about, and John Jay sitting at 0-3. So definitely, and Nanuet. I mean, there's some surprises here in some good ways and some not so good ways. Thoughts on B, Mars? It feels like B is the offensive league, and at times not some great defensive stuff. But any thoughts on B?
Yeah, it's definitely been high scoring all across the board, and I feel like the teams that are more defensive oriented are teams that are doing better. But I definitely will say that it's complicated. Like BCD is that extremely complicated system, and it almost feels like you're hoping that Section 1 comes out with an official formula, and so that teams can really start seeing where they land. I think after this week, that should kind of be a thing. I feel like they should have some sort of official calculation put out so that schools know, because you know what it is, by after week this coming week, by week 4, this starts to set the stage for playoffs, right? And if you don't even know where you land in this whole mishmash of BCD, that does kind of change a lot of things, right? And that honestly might be a motivator for teams if they know where they're standing. So I do think that they kind of need to come out with some sort of official standings list or something, because as much as Game Day 1 can do as best as they can, Section 1's got to come out with this calculation so that everyone can kind of figure it out, because every coach you ask in this BCD mashup, no one knows what the standing is right now. Like, you really have to sit there and calculate it with a graphing calculator or something.
I know. And then I wonder, what is the actual formula? If someone can in chat knows, they could share it with us. That'd be great, because then I'd have to get my calculator out. Similar with C too, and similar, like C relies heavily on who you play, not just again on your victories, but right out of the gate, Bronxville and Dobbs Ferry. I mean, playing B schools, winning against them, they have been very, very impressive to start things off. this year. Pud Valley also, they had a ton of kids graduate last year. Not a huge team, new coach, starting off the year 3-1. That's honestly um, a pretty good start to the year, and a nice job by the coaching staff there and the kids. So that's kind of the thoughts there on the C aspect, and again, relying heavily on not just wins, but who you played, preseason stuff, yada yada yada. For D, I'm not going to obviously show it's Tucko and Haldane. Both have actually started off the year very well. Tucko's undefeated. Haldane's got one loss. So I mean, the D schools being very competitive. Um, like they've usually had the last few years. They have been really, really competitive and kind of battling. Um, and then the Hudson Valley Football League, which you see Tappan Zee sitting at 2-1. They played a week 0 game, which their overall is 2-2, but Peekskill starting off 3-1. Tappan Zee starting off, they're 2-2 overall, but 2-1 in league. Greeley sitting at 2-2. Panis has been kind of a nice surprise. This one, I think they're 2-1. I don't know why it's saying 1-1 here, but if you saw my preseason predictions, the top 4 is looking familiar to the crowd out there. I wonder if they can hold true to it. It'll be one of those things. I kind of thought this would be the 4 teams. So nice start for them, and they're making me look a little smart, at least for the first half of the year. All right. Those are the standings, guys, and obviously we'll do this with more and more information coming out, especially for BCD for the formula stuff. And when we start going through the playoff discussions, we'll start looking at different scenarios. We're getting to that point where now we're at that point where obviously you got to focus on the week, but start looking at, scenarios on, clinching first seed, second seed, third seed, and stuff like that. So definitely an interesting time. We are getting down to the second half stretch. But with that said, it's time to go to our interview segment. And I mentioned at the top of the show, we usually like to bring someone on, whether it's the upcoming game of the week or someone who performed exceptionally well, or a team that has really been impressive. And for this week, it actually is our game of the week as well. But we were joined yesterday by quarterback and defensive back Jackson Kearns of Dobbs Ferry. He's obviously had a tremendous start to the year, as well as Dobbs Ferry has, and they have a huge matchup coming up. And so I got to spend a couple minutes with him yesterday to talk about the start of the season and his upcoming matchup. And I'd like you all to see. Joining us now, he is the quarterback and defensive back for the Dobbs Ferry football program. Welcome to the show, Jackson Kearns. How's it going, Jackson?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining. And let's just start off with the start of the year. I mean, you guys have, when the schedule first came out, and I remember talking at Media Day with Coach and you guys about multiple B teams, and you guys are a smaller team. And it felt like a big hill to climb, but you guys come out and beat multiple schools that are bigger than you on the road, at home. Very impressive start. What can you tell us about what is kind of the biggest reason why you guys have started off so fast?
I would say just, the whole off season, just putting in work every day in the winter, lifting, running, getting in shape, getting bigger, faster, and stronger. And then our coaching staff. I mean, just having us prepared every week with a great game plan going in, and everyone feeling comfortable, when it's game time.
Now, you've really led the way offensively. You guys have multiple backs who can make big plays, but you've had kind of Madden numbers these last couple of weeks. You have 12 offensive touchdowns, 13 total in 2 weeks. I remember last year watching you. You were a real spark plug, and you had a veteran quarterback. You were a running back. Now you moved into the quarterback spot, and you said you've been playing quarterback your whole life. What does it mean to be a quarterback for the Dobbs Ferry football program, to kind of lead this team in front of your community?
Oh, it means so much to me. And my dad's on the coaching staff. He's been coaching me since I was a little kid. And yeah, it means so much. I've been dreaming about doing something like this since I was really little. And, I've been around the team since I was a really, really young kid. So yeah, it's really just cool to be here and have success.
One of the coolest things that I always love about watching the smaller schools is, there's a lot of times the quarterbacks only get to play one way, right? a lot of teams are nervous to play their quarterback on the other side of the ball. You have to play both sides because you want to get your best 11 out on the field. So you play defensive back as well. What are some of the things that you've liked from your defense so far this year that you can share with us, and things that you guys can improve on?
I mean, I think that we've improved from week one, coverage wise. I mean, against Pleasantville, I mean, they threw the ball really well against us. And then we had a real learning curve the last 2 weeks. And then we go up against, a high powered offense like John Jay, and we deal with their throwing game well. So, that's something that we've been much better with and improved upon, but we got to tackle. We missed a lot of tackles last week against John Jay. Their running back he was really, really good, and we struggled tackling him. So yeah, we gotta get better at tackling.
Let's talk about the upcoming game. Another really good team in Tuckahoe. You guys are both undefeated, both playing each other. What have you seen from Tuckahoe from a defensive standpoint, you at the quarterback spot, that they do well that you've seen on tape?
I mean, they're always just we play them every year, and we've been playing them for so long. And their coach is, again, a great coach. I'm sure that they'll be prepared for all of our run game, all of our deception and all of that stuff. They're going to be well coached and they're going to be disciplined. Yeah, so that's something. Yeah.
Last question I have for you, Jackson. What can you guys do to give yourself an opportunity to win this upcoming weekend?
Just have a great week of practice. You know, just every day locked in, focused. We're there for a while every day, so we just got to stay focused, and get it done on Saturday.
Well, thank you so much, Jackson, for joining us. Jackson Kearns, quarterback and defensive back for Dobbs Ferry Football Program. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackson, for joining us. We appreciate getting to talk with some of these very talented athletes, and appreciate the few minutes that we get with them. Very impressive start, and we'll talk about that big upcoming matchup as well, by him and the Dobbs Ferry team. Well, Mars, it is time for the main event, and that is our game picks. And like always, guys, we got to talk about what happened last week. And your boy Frank has returned to the top of the mountain, won by 2 games. So now the series is 2-1 Mars, but I am clawing my way back and need to have a couple back-to-back strong performances to get where I belong, which is at the top. So that's what happened last week. I beat out Mars by 2 games, but Mars is still up on the season. And so we're going to dive from the Hudson Valley Football League to the AA, opposite of what we did last time. And so we'll start at the Hudson Valley Football League, Mars. And let me just get my notebook out. I'll put all my notes and the game picks. And so make sure that Mars doesn't change his mind too often. But let's dive into it. First one's up, and that is Port Chester 2-2 at Albertus Magnus. That is 1-3. And looking at last week, Port Chester won versus Croton Harmon via a forfeit, so they didn't get to play the actual game. Albertus Magnus lost 35-22. And looking at these two teams, both 1-2 in league play currently. And for Port Chester, listen, it's been a struggle offensively for them the last couple of games. The offense is dedicated around the running game with their running back and Morale, but they have to protect the ball better. They only scored 1 touchdown in the last 2 games offensively. So definitely need to pick things up because they're playing a defense that has forced some turnovers the last 2 games. I mean, 4+ turnovers Albertus Magnus has forced. Defensively, they've given up 20+ points in the last 2 games. They're up against a tough passing team. And I look at Albertus Magnus, yes, you see 35-22 at Peekskill, but they clawed their way back in that game and had an opportunity to potentially pull off the upset. They're the 4th ranked offense out of the 8 schools in the Hudson Valley Football League, has scored 20+ points in the last 2 games. There's pass attack with Miller making big plays last week, McGinnis making big plays last week. If defensively they can force a couple turnovers here, Mars, I think this offense can make some big splashes. I'm going to go with Albertus Magnus to win at home. I like the passing game. I like the way they fought last week. Defensively, yes, they give up a ton of plays in the run game, which does have me concerned. But they have forced 5+ turnovers combined the last 2 games. If they can force some ball turnovers to go their way, I think they're going to win this game. I'm going Albertus Magnus.
Yeah, no, I was really in the middle about this one. I'm also going to go with Albertus Magnus. I do agree that Portchester having that week extra to kind of rest and kind of recover is going to help. But the one thing that does concern me is the fact that their offense, they've only scored one touchdown in the last 2 games, right? And when you are kind of struggling to be consistent with your offensive ability, I definitely get a little concerned that points are going to be a problem here, especially with Magnus's defense. Yes, they give up a lot of points, but they force a lot of turnovers, and I think that Magnus is going to win at home.
Next up, we have Walter Panis 2-1 at Poughkeepsie, who's 1-3. Panis won 23-26 at Tappan Zee in overtime, and a big time win for them last week. Poughkeepsie lost 25-0 at Greeley. And real interesting game for me. Panis, starting 2 weeks ago, it felt like they let a game slip through their hands versus Albertus Magnus. They had 4 turnovers in the game, and then they come back this past week with a pretty big time win on the road versus the defending Hudson Valley Football League champs. So it's like, which Panis are we going to see? Because offensively, they can move the ball. This is the number 1 offense in the Hudson Valley Football League as of week 4. They have scored 25 plus points in all 3 games, and it's led by their running back and running game in Doherty, who had 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Quarterback Mekudu had a passing touchdown to Fleming. Defensively, though, they have given up 20 plus points in the last 2 games, but they can generate pressure. And that's what leads to Poughkeepsie. At times they can move the ball, but they struggle to finish drives because of too many negative plays. I mean, I'm going to go with Panis here because defensively for Poughkeepsie, they struggled versus the run the last couple of weeks. Obviously, that's a big thing that Panis does well, being the number 1 offense and running the ball as effectively as they have. Defensively, I know they've given up some big points, but they can create those pressures, and Poughkeepsie has given up those negative plays. I think Panis is going to go on the road and win this one. I'm going Panis.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that Panis obviously had a big win against Tappan Zee. I think they, on all cylinders, offensively they scored quite a bit. They're the number 1 offense in the HVFL, and defensively, yes, they have struggled, right, giving up the points. But I think Poughkeepsie has more struggles right now, right? They are struggling against the run. Greeley had shut them out. I think all around they just have to kind of get in the groove, and I just don't think they're going to do that this week. I'm going to go with Panis.
Next up, we have Peekskill 3-1 at Tappan Zee, who's 2-2. A really interesting game here for me. For Peekskill, they won 35-22 versus Albertus Magnus last week. For Tappan Zee, they lost 26-23 versus. Did I say Panis? They won 35-22 versus Albertus Magnus. Peekskill did. Tappan Zee lost 26-23 versus Panis in overtime. Really intriguing matchup here, Mars. Peekskill currently 3-0 in league play with wins against Greeley, Crone, Harmon, and Albertus Magnus. For Tappan Zee, they have wins versus Albertus Magnus and Poughkeepsie, but lost that overtime to Panis, which could loom very large here. For Peekskill, I like the way they run the ball. I mean, it is a real strong part of their game. Jacobs kind of leads the way, had a strong game last week. We know JoJo Walker has been a big play guy for them. They run that kind of wing T offense, and it's been very beneficial to them. They've scored 27 plus points in back-to-back games. And defensively, Mars, the number 2 defense in points allowed. They create a ton of pressure. They're going to bring a ton of blitzes, try to generate those negative plays, force those turnovers. For Tappan Zee, this is the number 2 offense in the Hudson Valley Football League. Have scored 20 plus points in 3 straight games. Tobin is leading the way with his arm and his legs. And wide receiver Kukla is becoming a big-time player in this league. Multiple touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. Last week, 7 catches for 124 yards. He's a big-time player, but can they stop the run? That's going to be a big thing. They give up 3 rushing touchdowns last week. This one was a real hard one for me to pick, but I am going to go with Tappan Zee. One thing that has really been hurting Peekskill is penalties. You saw that last week, which allowed penalties and then some turnovers have allowed Albertus Magnus to claw back in that game. If they played that same way this week on the road, I think Tappan Zee has a really good chance to win this one, get back on track. Because there have been some ugly penalties for Peekskill. So I'm going to go with the upset, the home team, Tappan Zee.
Yeah, see, I was really debating this one quite a bit. Tappan Zee at home, it seems really appealing to me, mainly because, yes, they had a really tough loss against Panis. When you lose in overtime as in a heartbreaker like that, it always does kind of shake you, and it makes you want to really focus and do as best as possible the following week. And the fact that they're playing at home does help them quite a bit. But I think Peekskill right now is hitting on all cylinders. Their defense is really impressed me so far, and they really have to just limit the mistakes. And if they kind of just condense the amount of penalties that they have,
Yeah.
I think they could be the most dominant team in the HVFL. And I think that Peekskill is going to go on the road and they're going to win this game.
Next up, we have the last one from the HVFL, and that is Greeley 2-2 at Croton Harmon, who is 0-3. Greeley won 25-0 versus Poughkeepsie last week. Croton Harmon had to forfeit their game last week, which I hope that they can play this week. I hate seeing teams having to forfeit games, not being able to complete games. So I hope that game does happen. But when I look at this, for Greeley's offense, it has been up and down, right? You've seen mixed results so far this year, but they have scored 20-plus points the last couple weeks. They've really started to establish the run a little bit better. But even when you look at last week in that first half, they struggled to finish drives. It was 5-0 at halftime. But second half, they started to get things going. The offensive line was moving people. Lombardi was making plays, Kim making plays, and the play action game was starting to work. Special teams has been really important for Greeley on drives that have stalled. They have one of the best kickers out of the smaller schools in Agdern, who had a 45-yard field goal last game, which I think would tie the school record. Right, so they have a strong special teams advantage. Defensively, though, Mars is the number one defense in the Hudson Valley Football League. So even when the struggles have come offensively, this defense has been pretty consistent. It's led by Weinstein, and I think they're going to win this game on the road. I hope the game is played. If it is played, I like the defense. Even when Greeley has at times had mixed results offensively, I think they'll run the ball effectively and win this game. I'm going Greeley.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Greeley. I think their defense has been really impressive. They haven't not allowed a team to score more than 14 points in a game so far. And obviously, when their offense is really humming, it really does make a difference. And I think that the offense and defense of strategy makes the most sense, especially because if their defense is playing hard-nosed, you want to get their offense to really chop down the clock. And once their run game starts to develop, it really does make life a lot easier. So I'm going to go with Greeley here.
All right, that was the Hudson Valley Football League. Let's move to BCD League. And with that, as we obviously transition, guys, make sure you hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button if you haven't already. Share this out to people who might enjoy this kind of content. Anything you missed will be posted on the channel. And think about joining our Patreon, of course, for some obviously free stuff for our announcements and premium content for paid members. It helps support our group. All right, Mars, let's keep it going. Let's dive into BCD. And obviously, week 4, and I still made the mistake of not putting the schedule up. Oh, boy. So I apologize on the Hudson Valley Football League stuff. But BCD now is up on the board. We have 11 games going on. And the first one, a real interesting matchup for me, and that is Haldane 3-1 at Hen Hud, who is 2-2. Haldane lost 28-16 versus Pelham last week. Hen Hud lost 41-16 versus Pleasantville. And for me, offensively for Haldane, we know it starts with the run game, and they have a couple backs who can make some big plays in the running game. Gogler, who obviously is really important, a physical runner for them. Williams is another one who's been a playmaker running the football. And even their quarterback in Corliss is a guy who can run the ball. But what has been a big issue for Haldane is the turnovers. They had 3 INTs last week. They have had 5 over the last 2 weeks. Now, defensively, you want to see a wild stat for everyone? Haldane, out of the 22 teams in BCD, it's Haldane who's number 1 defensively in points allowed so far. Now, last week was a struggle against some of the big plays in the passing game. So that's obviously a huge concern. Hen Hud has a lot of speed, especially from a young man called Parkes. I mean, he has been absolutely sensational this year. He had 2 touchdowns last week, even in the big loss. And they have some other guys in Hunter Kennedy Brown, who's a big play receiver. Hitsley is another guy. And their quarterback in Womack, who you can know drive the ball down the field. But they have had a ton of turnovers and penalties for Hen Hud, which it's hard to get consistency on the offense when you keep shooting yourself in the foot. And defensively, they've given up 28-plus points in 3 straight games, including struggling against the run. This one was really hard for me to pick because they are home. I mean, and Parkes is a guy who can break open a game at any point. But I'm going to go with Haldane to go on the road because I like the way that they play defense. They really get after you. They could slow down the running game, but they cannot give up the big plays like they did last week. And Parkes is someone who can bust the game open at any point in time if they can limit the big chunk plays, right? Hen Hud's going to move the ball, but it'll limit those 50-yard touchdown plays. I think they will, And I think Haldane's going to go on the road and win this game. I'm going Haldane.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like the biggest thing for me is the defensive play. Haldane, like you said, even though the stat is surprising, their defense has been really consistent. And I feel like yes, their offense is 14 out of 22 in points scored. I just think that Head Hud is kind of in middle in the pack on both offense and in defense. And I feel like the big thing is going to be, whether or not the defense will step up. Like you said, they given up 28 plus points in three straight games. And Haldane, if they get the ball rolling, especially on the offensive end, their defense is really going to show up. And I feel like that is a recipe for disaster for Hen Hud. So I feel like Haldane is going to win this game.
Next up, we have Edgemont Blindbrook football program, who's 1-3 at Valhalla, who is 1-2. Edgemont lost 20-16 versus Hastings. Valhalla lost 28-20 at Tuckahoe. Now, both these teams are trying to get back on track. Edgemont has lost 3 straight games. Valhalla has lost 2 straight. And so, again, looking at this game, for Edgemont, offensively has been very mixed. I mean, they have at times shown that they can run the ball. And we have seen, they've scored 16 plus points in 3 straight games, right? Which is nothing to just bat an eye at. But there's been times where they've struggled to finish drives. They've had turnovers. Defensively, they're a little bit better, but they have to slow down the run. And they have at times in the 4 games, 2 of them, they've played, I think, pretty strong defensively, but 2 of them they've given up 40 plus points. And because of that, listen, I'm going to go with Valhalla. I know this is not the start of the year that they've been anticipating. They're 16th in points scored offensively. They played some tough opponents in Pearl River and Tuckahoe. It was good to see Foy set back because he was super important. Had 3 touchdowns last week. Dean and Talley, you saw that they were able to run the ball. They got over 200 yards rushing, but they have to limit the turnovers. 2 turnovers last week. Turnovers have been hurting them defensively. Back-to-back weeks of giving over 200-yard performances. They have to be better, and I think they will be better. I think the coaches are going to have, they're back at home, scheme things up, get some players healthy, and I think you're going to see a pretty strong performance by Valhalla this week. I'm going to go with Valhalla.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Valhalla. I feel like the biggest thing, you mentioned it at the end here, is about health, right? And I feel like they've kind of been beat up for weeks now, and I feel like now that they can go back to home, right, they might have that more of a momentum on their side. I feel like they're going to kind of get back to what they do best, right? And I feel like their offense has just got to get back into a little bit of consistency with the run game, but I think their defense really needs to kind of limit the big mistakes, right? If they can try to force some turnovers and get their offense some more opportunities, then I think Valhalla is going to win at home. I'm going to go Valhalla.
Next up, another really intriguing matchup. Westlake 2-1 at Pelham, who is 3-1, a really good B matchup here. Westlake won 41-13 versus Ardsley. Pelham won 28-16 at Haldane. And I'll just say this: I thought Westlake was one of the most impressive teams last week. Really dominated the defending champs in Ardsley in each facet of the game. I mean, they were physical at the point of attack, on the offensive end, moving people, allowing their running backs to get a ton of space, who made people miss in at the second level. And defensively, they defended the edge very well, which put Ardsley in a lot of second and third and long. And to me, that's kind of the formula. Running the ball well, obviously moving Nick DiNapoli to the running back, from running back to quarterback, and allowing him to run the ball with a ton of, whether it's power read, quarterback designed runs, off tackle and outside. They have really excelled at it. He had 295 yards and 4 touchdowns last week running the ball, Mars. This offensive line was dominant, and he wasn't alone. I mean, Hud had 83 yards. This offensive line and tight end group and fullback group really move people. And if they can do that, they'll be a tough team to beat. Defensively, the front seven was dominant. I mean, Pippo, Negrelli, and company really leading the way. Piazza had an INT last week. For Pelham, this is an offense that has scored 28 plus points in 3 straight games, and Reese has really led it by rollout game, hitting big plays down the field. He had 251 yards and 55 yards rushing last week, so over 300 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And can these receivers, though, can they make the play against this Westlake secondary? Because I do think running the ball is going to be tough this week versus that front seven of Westlake. They swarm to the ball. They defend the edge well. I do even like them defensively. They're number 5 in points allowed, but can they stop this rush attack? Which, again, it's the quarterback, it's the fullback. if they can get Westlake in second and third and long, I think they'll have a chance here. But I think Westlake's going to control the trenches. I'm going to go with Westlake to win this one on the road. Two teams that I've been pretty high on before the season started. I think Westlake is going to win this one. I really like the way they played last week, and if they can continue to build on that.
You see, this was really tough for me. I mean, I do agree that this game feels more balanced overall. I think Westlake had been playing very well recently, and so is Pelham, right? I feel like what Westlake's loss comes to Bronxville, who has been one of the top teams in this BCD kind of grouping, and Pelham, losing to Dobbs, right, who's also been very impressive in that same realm of C. Right, so it's almost really interesting to me because I feel like both these teams are matched relatively well. I think I'm going to go with Pelham at home. I think defensively, they're one of the best teams in the entirety of BCD overall with 5 out of 22 points allowed. I think they're going to be tested heavily. I do think it's going to be defined based on the guys up front and who's going to be more aggressive at getting a push off the line. I'm going to go with Pelham, though, because I think they're at home, get a little bit more of a home field advantage. It's going to be a really close game, though, but I'm going to go Pelham.
Next up, we have Rhinebeck, who's 0-4 at Irvington, who is 3-1. Rhinebeck lost 35-22 versus Byram Hills, although I thought that game was close for a long time until the fourth quarter. For Irvington, they won 40-6 versus Woodlands. Again, for Rhinebeck, listen, they've scored 20-plus points in back-to-back weeks. They played a bigger team in Byram Hills last week, like I just mentioned, and they had the lead for a while until we got into the fourth quarter. Van Rohen, he was very impressive at 158 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Ani scored last week. Sal DeVary is also another guy who can make plays. But defensively, Marset has been a struggle. I mean, they're 21 out of 22 in points allowed. They have allowed 35-plus points in 3 straight games. And so when I look at Irvington, this is the 9th-ranked offense, Mars. They have scored back-to-back 40-plus point games. You got guys like Callahan at the quarterback spot, Nirati, who's been a big-time playmaker for them at the receiver spot, and Ibar running the ball. They have multiple guys. When they're not turning the ball over, this is an offense that showed that they can move things. Now, defensively, they've had a strong start to the year. But this defense is going to be tested, but they have had 2 games where they've allowed less than 10 points. So this has been a real strong start for Irvington. They are at home as well. I'm going to go with Irvington. Offensively, they've been extremely impressive. I do anticipate to be a high-scoring game here. With a lot of points. And I think Irvington is going to score. I think Irvington's defense is going to make just enough plays against Rhinebeck. I'm going to go with Irvington.
Yeah, listen, me, I will support Rhinebeck in their endeavors, and they've always rolled.
Take your bias out of this.
Sure. But I do think Irvington's going to win this game. I think that they have been playing very well. 6th-ranked defense based on points allowed. And you said 2 games allowing less than 10 points and facing that on an offense that has been very good. So I just think that they have a team that's been clicking. Defensively, they are playing at a top tier, and I think they're playing at home does give them the advantage. I'm going to go Irvington.
Next up, we have John J. Cross River, who's 0-3 at Byram Hills, who is 2-2. John J. Cross River lost 61-34 versus Dobbs Ferry. Byram Hills won 35-22 at Rhinebeck. Let me just start with this. For John Jay. Offensively, they have been very good. I mean, this is the 3rd-ranked offense, right, in BCD out of the 22 teams in points scored. They have scored 34-plus points in each game that they've played. Quarterback Ryan, dual-threat guy, explosive, running the ball, has hit some big plays throwing the ball, even though he's kind of new at the quarterback position. Rinaldi had a really strong game last week, out, running the ball, catching the ball. Tessie, we have known, breaking records, although he got banged up, so I don't know his status. Got banged up last week, don't know his status this week. But turnovers have been a big issue. I think they had 3 turnovers last week. They've had 5-plus turnovers over the last 2 weeks, which have been really costly for the team. Now, offensively, yes, the turnovers, but they put up, again, you're averaging 40-plus points a game and you're 0-3. It's because defensively, you've given up 50-plus points in each game this year. And so something's got to give here. And for me, they're going into Byram Hills, who offensively, has been mixed results, right? I mean, Weiss has been really good at times. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He's been a big playmaker for them. Quarterback Lazar, 3 total touchdowns. Kangalosi's been a main target for them at the receiver spot. But this is a defense that's also struggled. I mean, they're 16 out of 22 in points allowed, but they've got pressure on the quarterback last week. They forced some turnovers last week. I know John Jay defense has been really porous. They have not been good at tackling. They have not been good at setting the edge. And at times, they're staring into the backfield. You could see. So a lot of people are going to bring up, well, what scheme is this and what scheme? They need to do the fundamental things, right? Swarming to the ball, tackling, playing with the same aggression that they played. They move fast on offense, that same aggression defensively. I think you're going to see some of that. This is going to be a pride week, I think, for John Jay. Going on the road, they have given up way too many points. I think you're going to see them step up. They're not going to blow anyone. I think it's going to be another high-scoring game. But I think you're going to see John Jay's defense force a couple turnovers that they have needed at times. Have not done it so far to start the year. I think they do it this week. They go on the road against Byram Hills and win the game. I'm going to go with John Jay.
I mean, this is tough. And you know what it is? I think John Jay has a lot of talent. And their offensive ability is like unmatched to a lot of people. Like they are scoring high levels of points for any high school game. But at times you look at the defense and you just are in a state of shock that you see the levels of points. Like, you know, how often do you really see a team drop a 50 burger on anybody?
Yeah.
And you saw them lose with 61 points. Like, you know, that's like unheard of, right? And so I do agree with you that John Jay has that like kind of pride game that they need to kind of come back and really go all out. I just don't know. I just don't know how their defense does slow down teams. I think that Byram Hills is going to win the game. I think they have just enough that their defense will slow down John Jay enough just for them to outscore them again. I think it's going to be another high-scoring game. We might get another 45-40 game or something like crazy like that again. They really have to prove to me their defense is going to be, stout enough to slow down a team to score less than 30, like at least less than 30 points. Because I know John Jay can score on a dime, right? But it's about lowering the threshold of how many points the other team's going to score. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I go with Byram Hills here.
Yeah, and I think that pressure has kind of been weighing on the offense that scored a ton of points. And I think they've been forcing things, especially in second halves, feeling they have to score every time they get it. But I think the defense is going to relieve some of that by making some plays this time around.
I feel like, and I feel like, you know what it is? I feel like also that if they, they're ahead, right? If they're ahead of the game, you almost want to slow down the pace. You also want to kind of make it where it's like, you know what? Yes, you have an up-tempo offense, but you also can almost play defense by playing good offense. By slowing down the pace and when you're ahead, take the own time of possession in your hands type of mentality. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's something that I think that might help them out, if they did that.
Listen, we could talk strategy. You got to go out and tackle people. You got to go out and tackle. You got to go out set edge. You could score 60, but if you give up 70, you still lose. All right, let's go to the next game. And that is another really intriguing one, and that is Ardsley, who's 1-2, at Pleasantville, who is 2-1. Ardsley lost 41-13 at Westlake. Pleasantville won 41-16 at Hen Hud. And again, looking at these two teams, for Ardsley, last week they really got punched in the mouth, and what's strange to me is this feels like the second time this has happened, where they start off a game very slow. That happened for Sleepy Hollow. They get down big. Happened versus Westlake. Now, for Sleepy Hollow, they clawed their way back. For Westlake, they didn't have much to claw back from. They got pretty handily beat last week. Offensively, they really struggled to run the ball, and that was a big issue. It put a ton of pressure on their quarterback in Kaplan, who faced a lot of pressure in his face. They threw an INT. One of their stud receivers in Francis got banged up. I know he was going in and out of the game. Don't know his status. Caldera has obviously been a big-time playmaker for them. But going against this Pleasantville team, Pleasantville has struggled at times to defend. They're tied for 18th in points allowed the last 2 weeks. They have forced turnovers, though, and created pressures. And that has really helped them, especially in second halves of games, get victories. Because it seems at times they would give up big plays, but then in the second half, they'd be playing a little bit better. They'd avoid those big plays. They create more negative plays. And so Ardsley has run into that issue where they started off slow and played better in the second half. Pleasantville's been the opposite on the defensive end, right? But on the other end for Ardsley, they gave up 300 yards rushing last week for a defense that I thought has been shown at times to be really good. That's unacceptable, right? 300 yards rushing is unacceptable, right? So they were dominated up front. I mean, I think Ardsley's defensive front seven had a wake-up call last week, similar to what happened with Sleepy Hollow. Now, the next week, they played better. Let's see what happens this week. For Pleasantville, offensively, this is the number 2 offense in points scored in BCD out of 22 schools. And it starts with their quarterback in Rizzi, who, if he protects the ball, has been really strong throwing it down the field, the short game. Barreto has been a pleasant surprise. I think he's scored a touchdown in each game so far this year. And you're starting to see this rush attack with Hudzinski run downhill more, right? So you're starting to see some more balance these last 2 weeks, which to me makes this offense even more deadly. The question is protecting the football. That's obviously going to be extremely important this one. Mars, what are your thoughts on this game? And then I'll pick the game after your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, looking at both these programs, they've had a a historic history.
Yes.
I guess that's even a phrase. They've always battled one another, right? Whether it was in the section championships or in the really close games, really big games throughout the years. And obviously, this is the rematch of the sectionals and all that stuff. And so now it's going to be interesting to see how these teams kind of face off against each other, because I feel like a lot of people were putting Ardsley as the top team in B right now, and there's been a lot of surprises so far. But at the same time, Ardsley does have a lot of that grit, and you did see that in previous weeks. Last week, they kind of did get kind of beat up on by Westlake, but it's kind of the same thing. I feel like Pleasantville's kind of been that gritty team that defensively they've struggled, but offensively they've kind of surprised a lot of people. And I think one of the mentalities I think I've heard a lot about throughout Section 1 was that, when was the last time Pleasantville scored, 3 straight games with 40 points a pop? Like how's that? That's been a long time since that's been the case. You know what I mean? So it's kind of been very interesting to see how both these teams are gotten to this point. So it should be interesting to see what happens here.
Yeah, like I said, Pleasantville, the number 2 offense in BCD. But what I will say is this. Last time Ardsley got punched in the mouth against Sleepy Hollow, the next week they came out much stronger and beat Nanuet on the road. And so now they got punched in the mouth against Westlake. I think you're going to see them come out much better at the start of the game this time around. I think you're going to see them run the ball much better this week. I am going to go with Ardsley. I know they have been at times the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team of what Ardsley are we going to see here. And if they come out slow, Pleasantville's going to jump on them, especially offensively. But Pleasantville has at times struggled in the first half on defense, and they've given up a ton of points as well. So I do think you will see Ardsley start off much faster. I'm expecting to see some points in this one between Ardsley running the ball in their play action game and Pleasantville hitting some big plays down the field and them running the ball as well. So I think this is going to be a very entertaining game, but I think Ardsley's going to squeak it out here on the road. I'm going to go with Ardsley. All right, next up, we have Nanuet 0-3 at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program, who is 1-3. So Nanuet's looking for their first victory. They lost 31-10 versus Sleepy Hollow last week. Briarcliff lost 27-14 at Putt Valley. Listen, for both these teams offensively has been very mixed, right? For Nanuet, they're 20th in points. They've scored less than 20 points in 2 straight games. For Briarcliff, they're 21st out of 22 in points. They've scored less than 20 points in 3 straight games. So both these teams trying to figure things out. For Nanuet, they got to get back on track running the ball. And the same thing with Briarcliff. So whichever one runs the ball more effectively will have a much better chance of winning the football game. But both these defenses have had strong moments in this one, but at times have issues stopping the run, right? So they've done a good job of limiting teams in points, but Nanuet gave up over 250 yards rushing last week. Briarcliff gave up 200 yards on the ground last week versus Putt Valley. So both these teams have at times struggled to stop the run. Listen, I think Nanuet fighting for its first victory, I feel, is a very desperate mode right now. I think they're going to win this game on the road. I think you're going to see them run the ball much better. and then it allowed them to open up some things for the play action game, which in the passing game, they have been further along than I thought they'd be from a passing perspective. So if they can establish the run a little bit better, it'll open things up in the pass game even more, and I think they're going to hit on some of that. I'm going to go with Nanuet to go on the road and win this one.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like Nanuet's offense is going to be built along that same kind of mentality of out-leverage opponents and then run the ball to try to take away the time possession, right? Really put into their court. And I feel like in this kind of a system that they have, all they really need are a few drives to just capitalize on that and score. And then once they get ahead, that's really where they shine, where they can just drag out the game, run the clock out with how their offense is built. And I think that their defense is going to give them some opportunities. They're going to make it so that they create some turnovers. But I think Nanuet's offense will kind of bounce back in this game. I'm going to go with Nanuet here.
Next up, we have Putt Valley 3-1 at Bronxville. That is 3-0. Putt Valley won 27-14 versus Briarcliff last week. Bronxville won 41-21 at Pearl River. Bronxville hasn't been a big surprise, right? I've had, we talked about them in our preview show. High expectations for Bronxville. They have come out really strong. But Putt Valley has been a surprise. New coach, a ton of kids who graduated. Now for Putt Valley, we know that they've had a really strong running back, right? In Toronto, leading the way at the fullback spot. But last week, the quarterback running game was really working, right? Because so many teams are focused so much on Toronto that it opens things up for everybody else. And, they ran over 200 yards last week. But defensively, Mars, Putt Valley is the number 3 defense in points allowed so far this season, and they have forced turnovers in back-to-back weeks. But can they handle the physicality of Bronxville? That's going to be the big question to me, because when you look at Bronxville, it's all about the run game and play action out of it. And they've had over 200 rushing yards in each game this year, led by Formato, who's been an absolute stud. And McMurray, who had 4 total touchdowns last week, has been very efficient. He's been smart with the football and throwing it to guys like Freeman and Moore, making big plays for them. But this offensive line and tight end group and fullback group, they are moving people right now. And if they can continue to do that, they're going to run the ball very effectively. Defensively, this is the number 4 defense out of the 22 schools, and they have played teams like Pearl River, Sleepy Hollow, Westlake. So this is a defense that has been tried and true versus some tough offenses. I'm going to go with Bronxville. I know Putt Valley's been a very good story, but to go on the road and against the size and the strength of Bronxville, I think is a little too much. I'm going Bronxville.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed with how Putt Valley has been playing, and obviously with a new coach and everything. Usually that does cause the team to kind of struggle a little bit. But Bronxville has been that most dominant team right now in all of the BCD, and they've really been impressing me. I feel like their offense and defense have both been very consistent. They've dominated up front, and I like the way that they play aggressively. I think Bronxville is going to win at home as much as I think Putt Valley has been playing very well. I just think Bronxville is playing better. I'm going to go with them.
Next up, we have Woodlands, who's 0-4 at Hastings. That's 2-2. Woodlands lost 40-6 at Irvington. Hastings won 20-16 at Edgemont. And you know what? I mean, for Hastings, I know offensively it's been up and down. I mean, Rothstein last week had 3 passing touchdowns, throwing to Consorti and to Constantine. But what has impressed me about Hastings at times for their 2 victories is their defense. I mean, this is a defense that is 7th in points allowed, led by Jackson last week, and they had 3.5 sacks. They can really get after you at times. And up against Woodlands has struggled offensively. They're last out of the BCD schools in points scored. They've not scored more than 14 points in a game this year. And so Hastings at home, playing the way that they played defensively to get after the quarterback and force some turnovers. I'm going to go with Hastings to win this one. I know offensively it's been up and down, but defensively has really been more consistent, and then they've brought it at times this year.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go with Hastings as well. I feel like they've been more consistent than Woodlands this year. I feel like I like the way that the up front has been playing. The defense has been forcing, some pressures. I had 3.5 sacks last week alone, so I feel like they've just been playing very well. I'm going to go with Hastings.
Next up, another really good matchup here. Pearl River 3-1 at Sleepy Hollow. That is 3-1. 2 3-1 teams. Pearl River lost 41-21 versus Bronxville. Sleepy Hollow won 31-10 at Nanuet. And 2 strong offenses, Mars. Pearl River's currently sitting at 4th in points scored. We know about quarterback Lanise. He had 4 total touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. But excuse me, they need to get back to being able to establish the run. They're really good when they have that balanced attack. Mahoney last week against a tough Bronxville defense only had 9 yards total rushing. I mean, they have to then, Sleepy Hollow at times has given up some big rush games. And so for me, they need to be able to show some balance. I mean, Fitzgerald, he had over 100 yards receiving last week. Kalschenbenner has been really good, a big playmaker for them. They have multiple receivers who can make some plays, but I think it really opens up when they're allowed to run the ball with Mahoney, run the ball at times with Linese, which definitely opens things up defensively. Obviously, it starts with stopping the run. They have a couple games they've given up over 200 yards rushing, and against Sleepy Hollow, Mars, you got a couple of guys who can run the ball. It starts with Richardson, who had 264 yards last week and 4 touchdowns. Their quarterback in Bowen, who's a dual threat guy, and they could take those shots down the field. And with Onway, they have a 3-headed monster on that offense. Question I have is defense for them as well. Can they generate enough pressure up front? At times, they've been really good, and at times, you've seen people blow coverages. You've seen people give up those big run plays off the edge. So both offenses, I think you're going to see a high-scoring game. It's which defense is going to make enough plays. When it's even like this, you know how I feel, Mars. I'm going to go with the home team. I think Sleepy Hollow at home with the Headless Horseman riding down the sideline. I think it's going to give them the extra boost they need being at home. Close game, high-scoring game, but Sleepy Hollow ekes it out with the 3-headed monster versus 2, I think, heavyweights going at it in the B schools.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one for sure. And I feel like this is one of the game of the week if I was thinking about it. And I know that we have one more game that is the game of the week for us. But these, like you said, these are 2 powerhouses in this in B that have been very impressive, and they both are 3-1. Sleepy Hollow has been one of the big surprise teams that have really not a lot of people thought about as being as good as they really have showed. And they've been very balanced both offensively and defensively. They can really put a lot of pressure on teams with their defense. And Pearl River, like you said, they have such a dynamic offense. And when they are kind of hitting on all cylinders with rush offense and pass, it really seems impossible to stop them at times. And, you said the Sleepy Hollow's got the Headless Horseman going down the sideline. Pearl River's going to say, hey, burn the boats. Like, we're not going back anymore. And I'm going to go with Pearl River on this one. They're going to go into enemy territory. They're going to say, we're burning the boats, and we're going to come away with the victory. I'm going to go with Pearl River.
Okay. Well, that leads to our game of the week. And this is, again, 2 small schools. We have Dobbs Ferry 3-0 at Tuckahoe, who is 4-0. And Dobbs Ferry won 61-34 at John Jay Cross River. Tuckahoe won 28-20 versus Valhalla. And I said this last week when one of our Patreon members submitted a question on the most underrated teams. And I chose both these teams as I thought they were the most underrated out of the small schools. And now they're competing, both undefeated. And both coming off impressive victories versus schools bigger than them. I mean, for Dobbs Ferry, they've beaten Pleasantville, Pelham, and John Jay Cross River, right? For Tuckahoe, they've won versus Nanuet and has won against the defending champs in Valhalla, right? So impressive victories by both schools. Now, how they got there, well, for Dobbs Ferry, it's offense. I mean, this is the number 1 offense in points scored out of the 22 schools in BCD. They've scored over 40 points in each game this year. It's obviously led by their stud quarterback in Kearns. He had over 300 total yards last week and 6 offensive touchdowns, Mars. 6. And that is 12 offensive touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He is very impressive. What Dobbs Ferry loves to do is they love to play games with your defense because everything looks the same. They're going to run the ball in condensed formations to get to the outside and use their speed and then play action out of it. And then their play action is their quarterback rolling. Whether it's a quick pitch, they'll pitch it out for them to run to the sideline, or the play action where it's a faking to the fullback, faking to the halfback. And now if you're going to play man coverage on them, it's tough to cover these guys one-on-one. And secondly, if your eyes are looking to the backfield, the motions are looking the same. You're thinking it's run, but it's actually pass, and now guys are running behind you. So they do a lot of this play action game that has been super beneficial, and they have multiple guys who can beat you. I mentioned Kearns, but O'Connor, Mole, Smith, Ravage have all made big plays throughout the year. But the question that I have, if teams are going to play man against them, continue to, they'll make you hurt. Can this offensive line handle the tough front 7 of Tuckahoe? Because they got some size to them, they got some strength to them, And if they can create negative plays, Dobbs Ferry is really good when they're ahead of the chain. When they're in the second and third and long, that kind of playing games doesn't work as well, obviously, with a lot of people. Now, defensively is another story. Dobbs Ferry, early in the season, struggled to cover the pass, right? That was a big thing. I know Kearns talked about the added improvement of getting better in coverage so far as the season went along. But they have given up 30-plus points in each game, and tackling was a big issue last week. They cannot miss tackles. Tucko's got a couple of good backs. Kearns did have an INT for a touchdown. They did force a couple turnovers, but they have to tackle better, and they have to swarm to the ball because Tucko is going to hurt you with their backs as well. Then it goes to Tucko. Offensively, it starts with the run game. I mean, they've had multiple games this year of over 200 yards rushing, and it's led by their running back, Connolly, who's had multiple 100-yard games. Not a big guy, but he runs hard. He bounces off of contact, shows good balance. We know about Bryce, who's a dual threat guy, one of the best quarterbacks out of the small schools. He's been efficient, but this is another guy who they do read stuff with him, and he gets to the edge. He is tough to bring down. He is tall, he's long, he is fast. And this offensive line can really get after it. These wide receivers, because of the threat of the run game, these wide receivers are going to get one-on-one opportunities. And so look for Tucko to try to take advantage of that off the play action stuff, getting out on the edge, seeing if Dobbs Ferry is going to swarm to the ball and tackle. Defensively, Tucko is the number 2 defense out of the BCD schools, right? They have forced turnovers in back-to-back games. That tough front seven led by Serlo, Del Conte, Baghetti. If they can keep Dobbs Ferry a tackle-to-tackle offense and get him behind the chain, second and long and third and medium, Tucko's going to have a good chance in this one, especially if they can run the ball and limit the possessions. Mars, I know we have film room. What are your thoughts on the game before we dive into it?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a top tier matchup between both these squads. Dobbs Ferry, as I mentioned before, I don't think a lot of teams thought Dobbs Ferry was going to dominate as much as they have been against bigger teams, like just bigger schools in general. But their offense has been so impressive and led by Kearns that they seem like they're unstoppable. I mean, especially because they're running the classic kind of wing T offense that not a lot of teams like to go back to the old school stuff. But it's almost like watching old school magic. It's like watching like Houdini and just showing back up and doing some crazy things out there because someone who has played in the wing T offenses or someone who coaches in both spread and wing T stuff, I can tell you that the type of wing T that they run is efficient, and they've been doing it for a long time at Dobbs Ferry. So it's almost like it's just second nature. But they've been scoring at will. And obviously, when you think about Tuckahoe, defensively, they've been extremely impressive, forcing turnovers, really just causing a lot of pressure. So I think you're seeing really the dynamic matchup between the top-level offense in Dobbs Ferry and a top-level defense in Tuckahoe. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to happen here.
Yeah, and that'll lead me to the film room, and then we will pick the game. And what I wanted to look at, show the audience a couple plays from both offenses. Both offenses very strong running the ball, but the running game, because they put so much pressure with all their speed, it really draws the eyes into the backfield for multiple defenses, which opens things up from both play action and some read concepts for both teams. And I'll start with showing Dobbs Ferry and then Tuckahoe. And so let's pull up the film room. And can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Perfect. All right, and I'm going to start with Dobbs Ferry. And again, Dobbs Ferry, Mars mentioned it, they run a classic style offense, but they run things very, very well. And a lot of fakes, a lot of motions looking the same, which plays games with your defense if they're not disciplined, if they're not reading their keys, right? And so you'll see a ton of times, they'll bring in tight ends, they'll bring in condensed formations, you'll see motion. And what they're really trying to do is get to the outside. They're really trying to get these speedy guys to the second level. And you're going to see they got a tight end left, you got a motion with that wing back coming towards the right. And they're going to try to get to the outside, right? So this is not a too much complicated offense you're going to see. They're going to motion. But what is great about this, you saw the tight end highlighted, these backs can block, right? They give the effort blocking. This lineman have done a good job of blocking in space. And a lot of these motions are the same. At times it could be the fullback getting it, the quarterback pulling it, or a quick pitch to the outside. And a lot of these plays kind of complement each other. And so this play in particular is just a quick pitch, right? They want to get to the outside. And again, you're watching these linemen block on the edge. Seeing these backs putting in the effort, blocking in space, right? And the patience by the running back, letting things develop. and then turning the Jets. He doesn't even look that he's running that fast, right? But then this goes for 30 plus yards. And it's just different aspects. Blocking by the backs, blocking by the linemen, running back being patient, and then hitting the hole. And because of them running so successfully, it opens things up for the play action pass, which has been absolute money for them this year. And you're going to see a similar formation, right? Tight end left. You're seeing the motion to the right. This time around, though, again, they're going to run a fake. It's not going to be a quick pitch, right? Because this guy's not a T-back. Now he's up on the line of scrimmage. He's going to fake to the fullback. But because you're running the ball so well, it draws the attention of all these defenders looking into the backfield, right? A good fake. The receiver looks like he's cracking back, which they've done probably 1,000 times in the game. But it's an actual pass. And you can see all the defenders fooled. And now you see Kearns out on the edge. And now he has that option, throwing it or with his speed, running it. But he sees the man downfield. Look at on the move, delivering it. And these receivers are fast. They also pretty good receivers as well. Catch the ball, make big plays. Then it leads to Tucko, right? Another team that is really strong at running the ball, and they'll go into the spread concept and win by their numbers, right? And you can see here, because you got these two great runners, the running back, quarterback. The defense, they got 7 guys in the box, right? And if you're counting both the quarterback and running back, along with this H-back and offensive line, you got 8. You got the numbers. And so they do a really good job of executing by winning with their numbers. These offensive linemen have done a really good job moving people at the point of attack. You get some down blocks here, some pulls here. And this physical offensive line has done a really good job. Look at that. Movement at the point of attack. Good kick out. I got that H-back in space. And you get a guy like Connolly getting to that second level untouched. That's bad news for your defense. Not a big guy, but look at him. Run through that contact. Not afraid. He's been really strong this year. Another thing is, okay, we try to generate some pressure. You see this defense getting 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. But again, the quarterback is a threat to run too. You still got 8. You still got to count it. They got a tight end on there. But this defense is trying to be aggressive. You're going to see they're going to create some penetration, but they're going to run a read here. They're reading that edge guy. So when he crashes down, quarterback's going to pull. Good fake there. And you get Bryce on the edge. He's as dangerous as anybody. Long stride. See you later. Both these offenses, very impressive running the football. Different styles, right? One, you're seeing one tight end, but some spread stuff. The other one, you're seeing some classic offense, but both very effective. All right, Mars, that was the film room. Who do you got winning this big matchup and why?
Yeah, this is definitely one of the toughest games I had to pick, mainly because I feel like that both have these offenses that can score at will at times. And, you know, Dobbs Ferry has a scheme that you really can drain the clock and really own the line of scrimmage if you really can work that misdirection and that trickery that just gets teams thinking that you're running the same stuff over and over again. Now, Tucko, on the other hand, has a speed component where they're playing spread. They try to get you in some numbers, and then they try to beat you on those outside runs in one-on-one kind of matchups, while their defense has been extremely impressive. And so when I look at this game, you know, I struggled to pick my choice, but I'm going to go with Tucko. I feel like their defense is one of the best in this BCD league, and I feel like Dosberry, as much as their offense is predicated on this misdirection, and they've been very efficient all year long, their defense is what concerns me. I think if their defense allows for Tucko to get some points, I think Tucko's defense is going to be able to cause some disruptions, some turnovers, and that's going to cause them to get more advantage or more opportunities to score some points. And I think Tucko is going to have enough of those and try to just waste out that clock. I'm going to go with Tucko at home.
This is a tough one. I agree with you 100% because Tucko is at home too, and defensively have been really strong in the front seven. They're not easy to run against. And offensively, that duo of Bryce and Connolly has been really, really good. But I can't count Dobbs Ferry out. They have gone on and beaten teams that they've been an underdog, I think, the first 3 weeks of the year and have come out on top, scoring at will. The combination of Kearns and these other backs are tough for any defense to slow down. I am concerned defensively about tackling, right? They have to swarm to the ball. They have to keep Bryce in the pocket. But I just think offensively, they're going to put so much pressure, it's going to force a couple mistakes on the opposing team's offense. I am going to go with Dobbs Ferry once again. Has to go on the road. Yeah, they played a couple of teams at home, but going on the road against a tough opponent and a tough environment, and I think they find a way to get out of it. I am going to go with Dobbs Ferry in a close game to win. All right, that was the BCD League, guys. We are now moving to A, and this is a good opportunity to once again plug in. If you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. It helps support the channel. And also think about becoming a Patreon member. Let's keep it going. And guys, obviously, if you have any questions as well, always throw it into the chat as we're reaching the end here. All right, let's go to A, Mars. 6 games in A this week, all non-league. And obviously, the non-league part is not that it's not important because it could have playoff implications for the league. Not so much for your standings in the league, but for the league in general. And so if one side wins 75% of the games, and I think I calculated last time, I think you would need a complete sweep this week from one side to get it. So the odds are not high for it, but it still shows how you compete against some of these potential playoff matchups if there isn't a sweep. And let's start with the first one. We have Carmel, who's 1-2 at Clarkstown North, who is 3-1. And when you look for Carmel, they lost 36-14 at Brewster. But it was a close game. It was 21-14 at the end of the third before things pulled away. For Clarkstown North, they lost 42-28 at Rye, but they got the game. They were down big and got the game to 35-28 late in the fourth quarter. So both these teams were down, came back, made things close, still ended up losing. For Carmel, though, it's been tough for Carmel. And I know that it's hard enough to win versus the opponent anyway, but it feels like they're also battling their own administration. So things have not been easy for Carmel. On the football field, it's already hard enough to win. But, having people get involved in the football program, where they're trying to punish coaches and stuff like that, doesn't make things any easier for the coaches and also the kids, which is a whole other story. If anyone knows about school boards, and I know a bunch about corrupted ones, I live in Mayapack, so I have a good idea of that. It's a sad situation. I know Lohud put out an article about what went on earlier in the year, but that's a conversation if those want to submit one that I will go further in. But let's get back to the game. And Carmel offensively has been up and down. They have a young quarterback in Sullivan who continues to grow. He's had touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. DeGrazio has been a big-time playmaker for them, had a nice receiving touchdown. This offense can really make some plays in the passing game, but can they establish the run on the perimeter? Because Clarkstown North at times has been aggressive. They have forced turnovers, but you're able to get onto the perimeter at times against them. And Carmel's got to take advantage of that. And a big thing is not giving up as much pressure as they had. They've given up 4+ sacks in back-to-back weeks, Mars. And part of it is on the young quarterback not, holding onto the ball too long. Some of it is on the offensive line, giving up, losing their one-on-one battles, but they have to shore those things up. And as for defensively, they've given up 2 30-plus point games. They have to avoid the chunk play. Constant battle on the edge versus Clarkstown North, who's offensively, they're the number 2 offense out of the 12 schools in A. They have scored 28-plus points every game this year. And it's led by Kavanaugh, who had over 280 total yards last week, had a passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, but a couple INTs. Right, he's very aggressive, which will open up some opportunities. He'll force some things because he's trying to make the play. But this is a guy who can churn out yards and hit big plays, and he is a tough guy to take down. Gabai's another one, 96 yards rushing. Mulakau, Ferenzi, they have playmakers across the board. Look for them to try to get on the edge of Carmel, test the discipline of the edge players for Carmel in this one. Defensively, yes, they've given up a lot of big plays, but they have forced turnovers in each game, right? This is a defense that has turned the ball over, although has given up those big plays like I mentioned. Last week, they forced an INT and had a fumble, right? So if they can pressure the young quarterback at Carmel, force a couple turnovers, give their offense some couple possessions, I think Clarkstown North is going to win this game. They are at home. I know Carmel's got a ton of pride, but I think they're going to fight. I just think Clarkstown North's got too much. Offensively, they got too many weapons. Defensively, against a young quarterback, I think they'll create some pressure, which will force some turnovers. I'm going to go with Clarkstown North to win.
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree with you. I feel like, firstly, just driving to Clarkstown North from Carmel on a bus is going to be a ride, right? That's already going to be one of the most difficult things they're going to have to do. That's like the first battle, just to get to Clarkstown North from a bus. right? And then on top of that, they already have been kind of struggling with just having some consistency when it comes to both ends of the ball. And I feel like they had some good showings in games against Brewster, but they just kind of let up some big plays, and they kind of struggled to kind of get going for a little while because even the Brewster game was pretty close, right? It was a close game for most of it, really until the end.
Yeah.
But I just think that for Clarkstown North, I think everything's just going well for them. I think Kavanaugh has been really impressive. I have been impressed with how well he's played throughout this entire season. He has been like a force of reckoning to a lot of teams, and especially if teams don't really look highly to Clarkstown North, they find ways to climb back in the games. They find ways to own you if you don't really put some pressure on Kavanaugh, because he does find ways to get out of the pocket
Yeah.
and make some crazy throws down the field that I honestly would only see in Madden or something. But he's been really impressive so far, and I think Clarkstown North at home is going to win the game.
Next up, we have Eastchester 2-2 at Mayapack, who's 2-2. Eastchester won 40-0 versus Fox Lane. Mayapack lost 20-7 at Somers. For Eastchester offensively, listen, they've scored 20 plus points in each game this year. It obviously starts with the running game, and getting out on the edge is going to be super important. Against Mayapack, they're going to be outsized. I mean, there's no question. I think Mayapack has a clear size advantage in this game, especially up front. But quarterback Burbridge, 7-10 passing last week with 3 touchdowns, 151 yards rushing. He is a big physical player. He's going to have to run with authority. And same as Martucci, who had over 100 yards rushing. You can't tiptoe around this. Your offensive line is going to be, under a ton of heat with the size of Mayapack. So for them, they got to hit the hole hard. And they have to try to get out on the edge. And then take those chances down the field with those loaded boxes. That is their best opportunity, because defensively, when you look at this defense, statistically, they're number 2 in points allowed. But at times in the second half, they've given up big pass plays. They've given up big run plays that have been absolute backbreakers. In week 0 was pass plays. In week 1 versus Carmel, they ended up winning that game, but it was big pass plays. Week 2 versus Harrison, it was big run plays. So at times, this defense has shown a lot of force. But in the second halves, they've given up some major plays. Obviously, didn't really happen last week. As for Mayapack, offensively, they had 1 touchdown last week, and it was on a long Maskell rushing touchdown when the game was pretty much over. It felt like kind of Somers let go of the rope a little bit. But like I mentioned, I think this offensive line has a clear size advantage here, and Maskell, being one of the most talented backs, I think he could find some successes out here, and then it will lead to some bootlegs and opportunities for some of these receivers to hit those big plays, because Eastchester will be what I think is focused on stopping the run. Because defensively, Beta Vega for Mayapack's been very disruptive. I mentioned they're not easy to move. They had Somers at 0 points in the first half last week, right? So I think Mayapack being at home, would it shock me if Eastchester pulled the upset? No. But I do think Mayapack has a clear size advantage. They'll be able to run the ball effectively, and defensively, not easy to move. So if Eastchester doesn't hit the hole hard, or they're slow through the hole, or they're not getting out on the edge, if they're in second, third, and longs all day, I think it's going to be tough for them to win in this one. I think I'm going to go with Mayapack at home to win. And I think they, I know I've heard about injuries, but they have the size and they have the power running game, I think, to overcome this. I'm going to go with Mayapack.
Yeah, I got to say, I picked Mayapack last week against Somers, and I kind of
it was 0-0 at half.
I was Nostradamus because I almost picked exactly the outcome that was going to happen, especially at the first half. Exactly what I said happened. But I will say, as much as I mentioned, you already mentioned this, but as much as all I heard about was injuries and this and that, and yeah, injuries do stink in football, but Mayapack has a lot of talent, right? There's a lot of playmakers on this offense that can make, like Maskell can score a touchdown in a heartbeat. And this line is as big as I've ever seen. And they have a lot of people on defense that can cause some issues because, the first half, it was 0-0 last week, and the offense struggled to score really the entire game, obviously. And so you're not going to beat Somers in that way if you're not going to be able to score. I don't think it's going to be the same issue this week. I do think that, like you said, they have the size advantage. They have the skill players. I think Eastchester defensively is solid and they're tough. I just think it's going to be tough to really slow down power football when it's simple a fact of we're just going to run you over, right? And I just think they have the size advantage in that case. I'm going to go with Mayapack at home.
Next up, a really intriguing matchup. It's kind of become a annual rivalry as well. Is Somers 2-2 at Harrison, who is 3-1. Somers won 20-7 versus Mayapack. Harrison won 48-22 at Nyack. Harrison has won 3 straight. And when I look at this game for Somers, listen, offensively, it was kind of indicative last week versus Mayapack of their offense. In the first half, they struggled to finish drives. Right, they were at times couldn't run the ball. And so what Somers has always been really good at the last few years is when teams try to double team a star receiver that they have, and this one is Palazzolo, who's been that guy for the last few years, they've been able to win with light boxes or even boxes by running the football, right? Which then gives them opportunities to now, if you're out of that, to target Palazzolo, right? Now, these receivers, I think you're going to see heavy boxes again. You're going to see bracket again with Harrison, which is going to allow guys like Kelly and Violante to get one-on-one targets, which you have to take advantage of, but also open up the opportunities to run the ball again. And I thought in the second half, these running backs ran with more conviction. Guys like Valencia, I thought was really strong. Iglesias was running harder. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. Mitchell had a rushing touchdown. I know a mix of everyone will always point to the offensive line, right? They're not opening up holes. I thought the offensive line was moving people at times, but at times it's a mix. One times it's a missed block. One times it's a running back kind of hesitant. And so they just have to continue to work to get that because in the first half, it was a struggle last week. But against Harrison, this is the 10th ranked defense out of 12 schools. They've given up 20 plus points in each game this year. There are opportunities to be had versus this defense, but they have to run the ball against even or light boxes. It's a must. And to do it consistently because you also want to avoid Harrison getting the ball. And that leads me to Harrison. This is the 3rd ranked offense out of the 12 schools in A. They've scored 28 plus points in 3 straight games, and it starts, to me, with their rush attack. And Marisi and Karupi has been a nice tandem, and their quarterback in Badner, who's a dual threat guy, but can he be efficient? Sometimes he is lights out efficient, hitting big plays down the field to guys like McCoy. But then there's other times where it's like 7-20, right? And then there's a couple turnovers in there. So if he could be efficient, it opens up this offense. I mean, his efficient games, this offense is humming. When it's not, sometimes they run into that issue. So can they do that? Because they're going to see a ton of man coverage, I think, versus Somers. Because Somers likes to play man coverage so that they can be aggressive and they trust in their DBs. Really intriguing matchup, but I will say this. Somers' offense has been the 11th ranked offense out of 12 schools. It's been a real struggle. But Harrison versus Somers has what? Lost 9 straight games. And so I have to go with Somers. I know if Harrison has a real opportunity at home here, if they could pull off the upset, you're going to see Harrison being looked at now as a true contender in that league. No question. So a huge opportunity for them, but I got to kind of see it to believe it. Because Somers, to me, has their kind of number. They've won 9 straight versus them. Defensively, Mars, Somers has been good. This is the 3rd ranked defense, right? They've allowed less than 20 points in 3 straight games and only 1 score in 2 straight. They can get after you. Because if offense, they can pick things up. Now you're starting to see the Somers of old. They need to put 2 games together. I think Somers does, and they win this game.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the top games to watch right now. If Lowhud's, I want to see what their game of the week, but I would kind of think that this is the game of the week for Lowhud, mainly because you have 2 programs that have battled against each other quite often, whether it was in the postseason or have had some classics in the regular season. And I think that right now you have Somers' defense that is humming, on all cylinders, while Harrison's offense is at the same level, but just on the offensive side. And so I think the big matchup for me is going to be seeing how Harrison's offense goes up against this really tough and gritty Somers defense, because their offense has struggled, but you also have to think about who they played against so far and these bigger teams, and they may not be as sizable as they used to be, which is something that Somers has always kind of had a really strong run game that has been able to take advantage of that size. But now it seems like Somers has to go back to their roots a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to go back to the old wing T stuff, but I think that they're going to go back to some classic Somers offense and try to own the time of possession and use your defense as the backbone of this. And I think Somers is going to win this game. I think it's going to be really close. I like you said before, I wouldn't be surprised if Harrison has an upset, or not really upset. They're 3-1, but I wouldn't be surprised if Harrison wins this game because they're playing at home. But I also think that Somers, they need to start setting themselves up for this postseason mentality. Like they are a good team, but they've kind of felt weird. They haven't really felt like the Somers of old, right? And a lot of people have been kind of surprised about that, but they kind of need to get back to that rhythm again. Just because when you start struggling, it becomes a trend, right? And you don't want to have that trend heading closer to the playoffs.
Yeah. Next up, let's talk about Brewster 3-1 at Fox Lane, who's 1-3. Brewster won 36-14 versus Carmel last week. Fox Lane lost 40-0 at Eastchester. For Brewster, I thought the offense really got back on track, and especially the run game last week. Fox Lane has struggled against the run. Even though defensively, I think they've been pretty solid overall. They gave up over 200 yards rushing last week. And so look for Brewster with that offensive line and quarterback Prohaska, who had 4 total touchdowns. Fakara had a big fourth quarter touchdown. And this offensive line, who has a size advantage here to move people at the point of attack, where they can run the ball and then play action out of that. Defensively, Brewster had 5+ sacks last week, led by McKinney. Really getting after it. Defensively, they were more aggressive than they were versus, in my opinion, versus Mayapack, and can look for that aggression to continue in this one. They're not going to be oversized against Fox Lane. I'm going to go with Brewster here. Offensively, Fox Lane, unfortunately, has just struggled too much to score points. And I think that, with Brewster's ability to pressure and their ability to run the ball, I'm going to go with Brewster.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they did definitely get on track last week. And defensively, they've always played tough. They've had 5+ sacks, which is impressive. I just think Fox Lane, I agree, has struggled offensively. I think Brewster's going to take advantage of that. I'm going to go with Brewster.
Next up, we have Nyack, who's 1-3 at Lakeland, who is 2-2. Nyack lost 48-22 versus Harrison. Lakeland lost 41-7 versus Yorktown. Both teams trying to get back on track. Nyack has lost 3 straight. And when I look at Nyack, offensively, they showed that they can move the ball. We've seen that this year. They've scored 20+ points in 3 out of 4 games. They have running back Durasimi. He's got speed. He's a big playmaker. Bierfelter's made some big plays. Problem is defensively, Mars. They are last in A in points allowed. They've given up multiple 200-yard rushing games, which leads me to Lakeland. Because offensively, last week only had 140 total yards if you include the negative plays and less than 50 yards rushing. It was good to see La Peruto, the quarterback, back, and they have big receivers in Ray and Derrico, but they have to show some balance here. They have to run the ball a little bit more against a defense that has struggled to defend the edge, and that'll open things up in their passing game, but they have to be a more balanced. Defensively, was not their strong performance last week. They gave up a ton of rushing yards, but this defense is in the middle of the road. They're 6th in points allowed, and I think last week, obviously hurt their numbers, giving up 41 points, but I felt like they wore down because they got shocked by Yorktown, in my opinion. And defensively, they have to get back to playing some gritty defense, which we saw earlier in the year. That's what's got to come, and their ability to be more balanced, play some gritty defense will open up that passing game. This one was tough for me, but I'm going to go with Lakeland at home. I just think offensively, they will get back out on track, be a little bit more balanced. Nyack has unfortunately struggled defensively, and so I think Lakeland's going to do enough defensively on their end. Offensively, get back on track. I'm going Lakeland.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I feel like, after a team kind of gets destroyed and, against last week, they got destroyed 41-7 against Yorktown. You're coming back to home. Like you have this kind of wake up moment, look in the mirror, reflect type of moment. And I think Lakeland's going to say, you know what, we're not letting that happen again. I do agree their defense has been gritty all season. Last week, it was the worst showing they've had, but I think they bounced back big time. And I think their offense is going to do just enough. And I'm going to go with Lakeland. I think Nyack still has been struggling. I just think Lakeland has been, more consistent.
Next up, we have Yorktown, 1-3 at Rye. That's 4-0. Yorktown last week won 41-7 at Lakeland. Rye won 42-28 versus Clarkstown North. And for Yorktown, what a bounce back for them. I mean, they ran the ball really well. The best they ran all season. Coach Traeger and Coach Y, we know that they'll coach the guys up in Yorktown. But they really found the way to attack the edge with multiple guys. They had 300 yards rushing. Quarterback Coney had 3 total touchdowns. Caracati had 89 yards rushing. Sly had 78 yards rushing. And then you saw wide receiver Galante have 2 receiving touchdowns. Now, not a ton down the field, right? They was really focused on running the ball and getting the ball out of their hands quickly. And that's kind of their, I think, a formula that they can work on. But they're facing a much tougher front 7 in Rye this week. But they're going to get a ton of man coverage. So you're going to get opportunities. To me, if they could seal the edge, if they can get speed out on the edge against that man coverage, they'll have some opportunities here in the passing game, running the ball. But if, again, you don't block the guys up front, which Rye is very aggressive when they go into that man coverage. They're going to bring a ton of heat. It could be a long day. And if you're in second, third, and long all day against Rye, where they can play some games with you, it's going to be a tough showing for this offense. I mean, for them defensively for Yorktown, it was their best performance last week, obviously, only giving up 7 points. But how is this secondary going to handle this Rye offense, especially the skill position? Because if they get light boxes, go to Rye. This is the number one offense for a reason. Miller has been sensational. We've talked about him week after week. 3 passing touchdowns last week. Schumacher, another 100-yard game and 2 touchdowns. We know about Lewis and Trezini, but the running game with Garnett running the football on this offensive line, he had 142 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, including the knockout punch, 42-yard rushing touchdown last week. That kind of balance when Rye establishes, they are one of the toughest teams to defend. And so if Yorktown is going to bail out to stop, try to bracket some of these guys and go into max coverage, the running game for Rye can really get going. Don't forget to mention, we talk offense all this time. Rye's got the number 1 defense, Mars. They have forced 2 turnovers last week. I'm going to go with Rye. I know Yorktown, they're going to come out with trying to find ways to attack this defense. And it was nice to see the Yorktown defense come out more aggressively last week. But going on the road to Rye, I think is a hill a little too high right now. And Rye is playing at a real high level. I'm going to go with Rye here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Rye as well. I feel like they have, and you mentioned this already, offensively, they have been outer dominant. Miller has been putting up Madden numbers, 280 yards and 3 touchdowns just last week alone, but they just have so many guys that have the ability to make some big plays. And, when you have so many different weapons that you can go to at any point and they can make a big play, like that's a tough thing to stop. As much as Yorktown's defense last week really has stepped up big time against Lakeland, it's hard to match up against all these different guys that you have. Whether it's Miller or Schumacher or Strazzini, right? Lewis, like you have all these guys like Garnett. You have all these guys that can make big plays for you on the offensive end alone. And, that it's hard to stop all that. It's hard to bottle all that up at the same time. And like you said, defensively, they have been the most impressive of everybody right now, forcing turnovers, getting their offense back on the field. I think Rye right now is that top tier team. They're the most dangerous team right now, and they're just on a momentum swing. I'm going to go with Rye.
All right, guys, let's go to the final stretch, which is Double A. And we have 8 games. 7 of them is league. 1 of them is non-league. And probably the most intriguing matchup to me coming up right here is North Rockland 2-2 at Scarsdale. That's 2-1. If you guys remember last year, this was the game that went down to the wire at North Rockland, where North Rockland made a stop at the 1-yard line. And the controversy was he stopped at the 1. Did he get in with the referees? It was a classic from last year. And North Rockland last week, they won 31-0 versus New Rochelle. Scarsdale won 50-0 versus Suffern. And looking at this from both teams, both strong defenses. North Rockland's the 6th ranked defense in points allowed. So far, Oceana had an INT. Tucky had a fumble recovery. This defense is led by Kukulzak, Prisco, Feliciano, Joshim. Last year, they pretty much showed up in a goal line in the second half versus Scarsdale, pretty much covering all linemen, and did a pretty solid job, even though they struggled in the first half. In the second half, played much better against Scarsdale. I'm imagining they're going to try to run something similar this time around versus them, and obviously stopping the option. It's all about knowing your reads, right? And all about responsibility football. Can they stay disciplined when Scarsdale gives the different looks? That's going to be huge. And another thing is offensively. It has been a mix. I mean, they ran over 200 yards last week. We know about Norman at over 120 yards. Prisco's been a threat receiving and running. But can this passing attack get a little bit more efficient? They have struggled at times this year, hitting big plays down the field. For Scarsdale, they protected the ball last week, Mars, and put up 50. And that to me, they have multiple weapons. You have Brennan, you have Duvall, you have Krupkin at 2 receiving touchdowns. Quarterback Cantor was much smarter with the ball last week, had 2 passing touchdowns. They also brought in Simon, I think, that had a rushing touchdown at the quarterback spot. This offense, when they protect the ball, this offensive line has shown the ability to move some people, even though they're not that big, but they have guys who can hit plays out of this option. Defensively, they forced 4 turnovers last week. This is the number 4 ranked defense in points allowed. If they could slow down North Rockland's rush attack, look for the secondary to make some plays in the back end with guys like Papalardo and Brennan. I know North Rockland won. They're the defending champs, but they have to go on the road to Scarsdale this time. It's not in North Rockland. I think Scarsdale gets revenge this matchup and wins this game at home. I'm going Scarsdale.
I was really struggling with this one because I feel like this was that ultimate showdown last year, and it got literally to that like almost like a Friday Night Lights kind of. Did he break the plane? And they stopped the game and it's over. It literally got to that point. Um, but I do agree. I think that both these teams are evenly matched in what they have. But I do think Scarsdale is going to have the advantage. They're playing at home. I think the biggest thing is going to be their defense. If their defense is forcing turnovers like they have been, like for just last week alone, if they try to slow down this North Rockland offense and just stop the run or limit the run, then they're going to get their offense back on the field and they get to own the time of possession. I keep mentioning this. I feel like I'm saying it all the time, but the way that Scarsdale offense works, if you can get ahead of the chains and really just slow down the pacing, it does give you more of that air behind your back, right? And I just feel like Scarsdale's going to have that advantage. They're playing at home. They're playing with a lot of momentum on their side. I'm going to go with Scarsdale.
Next up, we have East Rampo's 0-3 at White Plains. That's 3-1. East Rampo's last week against Mount Vernon got canceled. I saw online that it was a forfeit, but I spoke to coach, and then again, I don't know if that's what the official thing is, a forfeit versus Mount Vernon, but the game got canceled because of some issues in the community. I hope they get to replay that game and that it is not a forfeit. But going into this matchup, offensively, it starts with them running the ball. We know that that's where it starts for them, but they need to avoid the negative plays and turnovers, which have been a big issue for them. And another thing is defensively. They've given up 26 plus points in all 3 games that they have played this year. For White Plains, this is the number 4 ranked offense in points scored, Mars. They're led by Pierre at 3 total touchdowns and 244 yards rushing. Him combined with Ryan has shown a really strong rush attack. If this defense can make some plays in this one, I think they are. White Plains at home, I'm going to go with White Plains.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I feel like their offense has been one of the top out there. Pierre has been really impressive. Their defense does scare me a little bit, but I do think that East Ramapo, they've just been kind of struggling. I feel like they definitely need to kind of shore up some things. I think White Plains has just the weapons. They can really, they can really capitalize on all the mistakes that a defense makes, and they just feel like they're on a good momentum swing. I'm going to go White Plains at home.
Next up, we have Mamaroneck 4-0 at Suffern, who's 0-4. Mamaroneck won 7-0 versus Clarkstown South. Suffern lost 50-0 at Scarsdale. And again, looking at this, offensively last week, Mamaroneck struggled to finish drives. I mean, they had a big turnover in the end zone. They need to run the ball better this week with Kobe, Leibowitz. Kelly had to pass the ball 25 times, which he completed 17 times, but 157 yards in that INT. Did have the big touchdown at the end of the game. But what stands out to me is this defense, Mars. The number 2 defense in points allowed. They have allowed less than 14 points in each game. Jack Perez has been really good leading the way, and this defense has forced turnovers in big moments that have given them momentum to win the last 2 games. Alker and Prevost, also guys who have made some big plays in this defense. Going against Suffern, they've had a ton of turnovers, and Mamaroneck has been good at forcing the issue and forcing those turnovers. I'm going to go with Mamaroneck on the road. Defense is just playing too good. Suffern, unfortunately, has given up a lot of points in this one, and they turned the ball over. I'm going to go with Mamaroneck.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like obviously when Mamaroneck's defense has been one of the best in AA, and then you have Suffern who struggles to hold on to the ball and be conservative with turnovers. You're really just asking for I guess you say it's a recipe for disaster for Suffern. I feel like Mamaroneck defensively has been really impressive. Their offense, like you said, struggled to finish drives, but they do have a lot of skill players that can make some big plays. I'm going to go with Mamaroneck.
Next up, we have Mount Vernon, who's 0-3 at Ossining, who's 0-2. I just mentioned Mount Vernon game versus Ramapo got canceled, or I don't know, officially is it a forfeit? Maybe someone in chat can tell me. Ossining had a bye week last week. So both teams coming into this game, offensively, I think have both struggled. For Mount Vernon, they've not scored more than 6 points a game. For Ossining, it starts with the run game with them with Albarra. We know about Ramirez, but they have not scored more than 7 points in their first 2 games. So both these offenses trying to get back on track. So it leads me to defense. And to me, Mount Vernon has had more consistent defensive play. So I'm going to go with Mount Vernon. Ossining has given up a lot of big plays, 26 plus points in each of their first 2 games. I'm going to go with Mount Vernon to go on the road and win this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I feel like that was kind of exactly what I was thinking. They both offensively are struggling. 1-6, 1-7. Both defenses have been struggling. So it's going to be about which offense is more efficient, and defensively, which one's going to make some more turnovers. I'm going to go with Mount Vernon.
Next up, a really intriguing one for me is Clarkstown South 1-3 at Arlington. That's 1-3. Clarkstown South lost 7-0 at Mamaroneck. Arlington lost 31-7 versus John Jay's Fishkill. It was 14-7 at halftime in that game. For Clarkstown South, listen, we know it starts with the run game. It's been an up and down year, but that running game is really what moves this offense. Van Etten and Chibazar are two physical runners, and they need to control the time possession in this one and give their quarterback Brennan, who's gotten better as the season has gone along, more comfortable in the offense, to be able to deliver some balls down the field. Now, defensively is where Clarkstown South played really strong last week. I mean, they're seventh in points allowed. They've allowed 14 or less points in back-to-back games. Termine had that big INT in the end zone last week. Arlington has shown at times to turn the ball over and struggled to run the ball. Right? They had 4 INTs last year. We know with Rancourt, sometimes, again, he faced a ton of pressure last week, which led to a lot of bad results. And at times, they just kind of go away from running the football. This was hard for me because in Arlington, that is a tough ride. Clarkstown South to Arlington. But I am going to go with Clarkstown South. I just think they're playing a little bit more consistent than Arlington. At times, Arlington's defense has played really strong, but then at other times, they've given up some big pass plays and some big run plays. And offensively, they've turned the ball over at such inopportune times in a few weeks. I'm going to go with Clarkstown South.
Yeah, I definitely was struggling with this one. I think the big thing is that when I look at Arlington's offense, the fact that they have been turning the ball over quite a bit, that is something that does concern me. And I feel like because of the fact that they have been having those struggles, I was debating this one, but I'm going to go with Clarkstown South as well. I think that, yes, it is not easy to go into Arlington and win. And I might even regret this pick later on because I think it's going to be a really close game.
Yeah.
But I think Clarkstown South is going to win. I do think the defense has been playing better, and I think that they're going to force some turnovers. And I just think they're going to win the game because of the fact they'll have more opportunities.
Next up, John Jay's Fishkill 4-0 at New Rochelle, who's 1-3. John Jay won 31-7 at Arlington. New Rochelle lost 31-0 at North Rockland. For John Jay, what an impressive start for the year for them, Mars. Number 2 offense in points scored. They have scored 3 30-plus point games. Quarterback Lawrence had 3 passing touchdowns last week. Cal Cogney has been a big time runner for them. Had some big rushes last week, especially in the second half. Johnson was back with 2 receiving touchdowns. Procacino has been a strong player for them. And defensively, Mars, we talk about this offense, which we kind of expecting to be good coming into the year. Defensively, number 1 defense in AA right now in points allowed. They create pressure. They create turnovers. Smith has just been all over the field back-to-back weeks. Burko had an INT. Forlivio has been a force. They allowed 24 yards rushing last week, and that's what New Rochelle, that's their best thing to be, is running the ball and trying to hit some big plays down the field with their speed and get out on the edge. But they've had way too many penalties and way too many fumbles the last couple weeks. With the way John Jay's playing defensively, I think it's going to be tough sledding for New Rochelle. I'm going John Jay.
Yeah, I'm going to go John Jay as well. I mean, they are probably the most impressive team right now in AA. All around have been performing at a top level. The defense has been creating pressure and a lot of turnovers, and their offense has been, finishing drives and just scoring with several different weapons. I just think New Rochelle has been struggling too much. Even though they're at home, I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill.
Next up, we have a non-league matchup. Randolph Campus 3-1 at Yonkers Forest, who's 4-0. Randolph Campus has won 3 straight. Again, not super familiar with them. They're an out-of-league team, so I had to do some research looking into them. Yonkers Forest won 42-19 at Brave. And Yonkers Forest, what a start for them. I mean, offensively, Mars, the 3rd offense in points scored, the 3rd defense in points allowed. Lightfoot and Mulvihill has been a really good tandem offensively, and this offensive line has opened up holes, but they have struggled with penalties, and at times have almost cost them big time in games. Defensively, they can generate some pressure up front. They had a fumble recovery touchdown, force a couple turnovers. This one's tough because Randolph Campus is on a roll. They can also run the ball very well, and they have a ton of speed if they get to that second level. But they have to go to Yonkers Forest. I'm going to go with Yonkers Forest here at home. I think, again, it'll be a high-scoring game. A lot of speed out there, but I'm going to go with Yonkers Forest.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I feel like, when it comes to how they've been playing recently, they've been extremely impressive. They had a big win last week against Brave. Their offense has been really, firing on all cylinders. You said 40-plus points back-to-back weeks. So I just feel like they're playing at home. I think their offense has been doing very well, and the defense has not made too many mistakes, and they're forcing turnovers. I'm going to go Yonkers Forest.
Finally, to wrap it all off, we have Ketchum 2-1 at Brave, who is 3-1. A colossal game, in my opinion. Ketchum lost 35-27 versus White Plains. They were up 13-0 early on in that game. For the Brave, they lost 42-19 versus Force, and I just said colossal because again, only one team on this side of the league can get in, and both of them now have a league loss. So if you have 2 league losses in this one, you're kind of out of it, especially with tiebreakers. So what a massive game in this one. And for Ketchum, offensively, this is the 5th ranked offense in points scored. This is an offense that showed that they can run the ball. They have the speed to hit some big chunk plays. You know, we had Biber had a huge receiving touchdown last week, also a rushing touchdown. We've seen quarterback Wickle show that dual threat ability. But defensively, Mars, they've given up multiple 300-yard rushing games, including last week. And when I look at Brave, you know, offensively, they have Retendi, who's been a big playmaker. He can run the ball and throw it. Dixon and Vega are speedsters on the outside, but they were hurt last week with turnovers. So the question to me is if they could limit the turnovers, this offense will be able to move the football. Defensively, this is the number 5 defense. I know they struggled last week. They gave up a ton of big chunk plays running the ball. But this defense, for the most part, has played some strong games, and they are at home. I am going to go with the Brave to win this game. Not easy for Ketchum to go on the road here. It would not shock me if it goes either way. Colossal matchup, but I think Brave's going to win this one.
Yeah, this is definitely tough. You know, I was thinking Brave. They're playing at home. They had a tough game last week against a rival school, but I'm going to go with Ketchum. I feel like they had a battle against White Plains, and like you said, they were up 13-0 early. But you know, White Plains offense was just really impressive. I think that when you lose a close game like this, it definitely is going to shine some light, and you're going to try to bounce back extremely hard in this one. I'm going to go with Ketchum. I feel like they're going to bounce back and get a win here. I think Brave is just, it's a close game for me. I just do feel as if, Ketchum might just get the advantage. It's going to be really close. I think the size advantage for Ketchum is going to give them, I think up front, they're going to win the trenches up front, and they think they're going to win.
All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much, as always, for watching. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. Think about becoming a Patreon member to help support the channel. But we appreciate you guys. As always, obviously look out for some more content coming down the pipe from me over the next 2 days, as well as the sports coming up this weekend. So enjoy that, and we will see you all very soon.